Hello and welcome to Around the Valley. We are here with our week 3 recap, and we're looking a little bit ahead into week 4. It's been an amazing start to the season. We've got plenty of things to talk about. We got a few undefeateds, had an undefeated fall, and we're going to roll right into it. Joining me as always is Kenny Hodges. Kaylee Harden will join us at a later date. She's unavailable today. But Kenny, how you doing?
Doing wonderful, man. As always, we get to sit here and we talk about football. We talk about everything that's going on around the valley. Like you said, we got a couple of unbeatens that are still hanging on. We got some questions. It's a prove-it week for those teams, and we'll get into that. There's a lot going on. It's funny how quickly this season, once you start to get into it, how quickly it all starts to go. We're already into week 4. We're about to hit that halfway point. But without further ado, man, let's talk about what happened in week 3, starting with the week 3 scoreboard. Fulton went to Van Nuys to take on the Wolves, and the Wolves offense continues to roll as they pick up a 63-8 victory. We head over to Taft, Verdugo, looking for that first win. They're still searching. They went and took on a Taft team, put up 40-plus points for the third consecutive week as they take down Verdugo 48-13. Heading over to Sylmar, Poly went on the road to Sylmar. The Sylmar Spartans continue to look really good offensively in the early part of the season as they pick up a 52-6 win over to Fairfax. Chatsworth, after a slow start on to begin the season, they go on the road to Fairfax and they pick up a 44-34 much-needed victory to get into the win column there for the Chancellors. Over at Granada Hills, the rivalry for the Tina took place between Kennedy and Granada Hills. It was a great game, a struggle, but Kennedy did what they've done so far this season. They improved to 3-1, and they keep possession of Tina with a 23-16 victory on the strength of a late touchdown to take that one. Over in San Fernando went on the road. They took on an Alamany team, a Southern Section team that was looking for their first victory. San Fernando hung tough, but Alamany took the win in the end. They go to 30. They win 34-6, handing San Fernando their first loss of the season. Cleveland went on the road to Franklin. It was a tough contest. Franklin's one of the better teams in the city. Cleveland hung tough, but they came away on the short end of a 31-28 score. Over in Panorama, we wondered what this game would look like. We expected it to be a dogfight, and that it was. Elko goes on the road and they shut out Panorama, handing them their first loss of the season with a 13-0 victory. Over in North Hollywood, the Huskies still struggling, still looking for their first win. They played tough, but they came up on the short end of the stick. Roosevelt came into their backyard and beat them 27-16. And last but not least, Canoga Park. We wanted to see what this young team would do, how they bounce back from their first loss of the season. Rancho Dominguez came in and Canoga handed them a 27-18 defeat to improve to 3-1. And that is your week 3 scoreboard. So I'll ask you, Arshavir, with everything, all the action that went down in week 3, what results stuck out the most to you from what happened last weekend?
Got to say that El Camino game, it was definitely played in a way where you would have expected Panorama to pick up the win. It was grinding. It was a ground game. It was defense. And, kudos to that El Camino team. They controlled all of it. They controlled the game defensively. They controlled the ground. They were the ones asserting themselves, which is what Panorama has done for the most part. That's a big one for me. Honestly, Van Nuys coming out, remaining undefeated. That's also something that I'm like, okay, they're going into a big one this week, which we'll get into a little later. And I really, really like that Canoga bounce back. We talked before the season. We weren't sure if this was the year or if they needed another year. Well, hey, look, they're telling everybody now. They're a team to be taken seriously.
I absolutely agree with that Canoga Park one. It's just one of those things you want to see from a young team, right? You start out 2-0, you show the improvement that the program is making, you show what some of those young guys come of age. Yeah, you had a little setback, you lost the game close late at the end, You wanted to see what they would do to coming back, and for them to come back and bounce back with a win and get the 3-1, it shows you that they're continuing that upswing. That program is continuing to go in the right direction to be able to bounce back in that way. Another takeaway I had from week 3 was just how Taft's offense continues to roll. This is 3 straight weeks putting up 40+ points with this offense. Nathan Swenson is showing that Nathan Swenson is also showing that, hey, a lot of the talk around the Valley is about Diego Montez in the city, but I'm also one of those guys. He's been in that program for a couple of years. You're seeing that continuity there. You're seeing the connection with him and Eric Coron, I think his name is, that receiver. Like, that's a dangerous combination that's going to be a problem for these teams in the West Valley to deal with when we get to league play in a couple of weeks. And last but not least, for me, with Kennedy, continues to show that they're never out of it. This team is every bit as good as we think they are, especially from the standpoint of they can play however you want. If you want to look at week 0, they had the winter shootout. You look at this past week with Granada Hills, they had to kind of hang tough and stick with, and like we always talk about with Granada will always test how much you like to play football, because you have to play a physical brand of football against that team. And in both of those scenarios, 2 different types of games, what did they do? If we get the ball last, we got the guy that's going to win it. So I just thought that just kind of shows you that this Kennedy team, whether they end up in open or they end up at the top of D1, a lot of that is still to be decided with so much football left to be played. But regardless, you have to have, you're a Kennedy fan, you have to have confidence that this team is going to be able to win a championship, or is capable of winning the championship, because we've seen them have to win in so many different ways already this year. And that 3-1 record is legit when you look at the competition they've played. You have a note about Panorama you wanted to throw in there?
Yeah, no, this is flag. These girls are completely dominating everybody. They're shutting out almost everyone that they have faced. Got to give a huge shout out to their go-to player, Livier Andrade. She is ranking nationally in stats. She is ranked top 5 in touchdowns. No, she's a top 10 in touchdowns. She's top 5 in the state. And it is so awesome to watch this. Like, this team, the way that they have put it together, she's got no correction. I was wrong. She is top 5. She's number 4 with 26 touchdowns in the state. Right there. And then receiving yards, she's number 5 in the state, just under 1,300. She is doing it all. And she's helping lead this team. It's awesome to see it kind of coming out of a program that no one really was expecting anything out of. And they're defensively pulling flags, not letting anything get by them. They're putting up numbers when they need to put up numbers. It's awesome to watch. And it's something we're definitely keeping an eye on the rest of the season. They are number 3 in the city section, so they'll most likely be looking at an open division run when that time comes.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, more importantly, it's good for the sport as a whole. For us to have teams in our backyard in the city section that's kind of helping grow the sport, when the truth of the matter is this sport itself is in its infancy, is exploding on the scene. Our young ladies now have another outlet outside of volleyball or basketball or softball to really sort of pour athletes and pour that time and dedication into. And Panorama is absolutely an example of where this is going to go. They're the first one through the door, but I have a feeling that a lot of these programs in and around what Panorama's doing will start to emulate. We're going to have a bunch of teams that continue to kind of push this forward on our side of the city. We know that there's some good teams on the other side, but to see teams like this kind of pop up in our backyard, it says a lot for where the sport is going.
Well, before we move on, I mean, we look it was 2 years ago, the first year. Correct me if I'm wrong, it was 2 years ago, the first year of flag. That was Verdugo Hills and they defeated Birmingham to win city. No, wait, was it Silmar? I remember they defeated a rival to win city. I don't have it. I got to pull it up in front of me to make sure I got it right. But they won the inaugural city title for flag, and that was an all-valley matchup. Last year, El Camino won flag, won their division. I think it was D1. So it's really coming together in the valley. There's plenty of schools that are putting it. I love watching it. It's awesome to see these ladies grow, have another outlet, and a lot of them are multi-sport athletes. You got a lot of soccer and basketball players. You got some softball players. So they're finding something to do in the fall that's fun, that's engaging, and it's keeping them ready to go for when their other season rolls around.
For sure. So, we'll keep an eye on them. They'll absolutely be in line for Open and D1 when we come to playoff time. Speaking of Open and D1, I have a question coming out of kind of week 3, looking at some of our teams that we kind of expect to kind of land in that area in 11-man when you're talking about D1, top of D1. Looking at Granada Hills, Cleveland, North Hollywood, and Arleta in particular. These are teams that we've come to know the last few years that these are teams that we expect to be sitting somewhere in the top of Division 1. It's really hard to get in the Open when you're talking about encompassing everything that's going on in the city. When you're talking about the Venice Palisades, the San Pedros, and Birmingham, and those teams, right? But D1 is where we usually find a lot of our really good teams sitting in that really competitive division of D1, where, maybe those teams aren't where in the Open, but they're usually really competitive and hard to beat. And if you really want to sit in the top of D1, because that's where you get to host some playoff games, right? In a competitive bracket. But when you look at Granada Hills, Cleveland, North Hollywood, Arleta, and how these teams schedule this year. Yes, everybody, you see the records on some of these teams. Arleta sitting at 1-2, North Hollywood still looking for their first win. Cleveland sitting at 1-3 now. Granada Hills, same thing at 1-3. Is it worth it to schedule as tough as some of these teams are scheduling non-league? And the only reason why I'm saying that is because obviously we know that the idea behind scheduling this way is if you are a team that has an expectation to win, you want to schedule in a way in which your resume sort of matches up when it's time to put these brackets together. But is it a detriment to schedule this tough the ways we've seen a lot of our teams kind of go for the gusto this year? And now you're sitting here going into week 4, you've only got one win. And mind you, Granada's schedule so tough, they're still sitting top 15, right? Because of the caliber of teams they play. But is there a balance to be had? In your opinion, should these teams not try to schedule all the toughest competition in non-league, or should there be a sort of a balance to kind of build your way into league play? What do you think?
Well, that's the crux of that argument there. When you're looking these 4 teams in particular, right? They're going to go head to head in league play. Granada's going to face Cleveland. NoHo's going to face Arleta. And they've faced each other in non-league before in different combinations. So it really kind of hammers home to me that you still want to schedule that, because strength of schedule ultimately is going to matter. You're going to end up, let's keep using Granada and Cleveland as an example, as the 2. I'm looking at them right now. They're both 1-3, right? But strength of schedule has them both still clinging to spots in the top 15. So, you put together a few wins during league play, and now you're looking completely different. But first, starting in the West Valley, right, this is a completely different beast than what we've seen before. They've scheduled tough, they've scheduled hard, but now they're going to go up against a TAF team that has such an explosive offense and has shown that their defense can really shut anybody down. an El Camino team that is scrappy and going to fight you every inch of the way. Then you got Birmingham, and nothing against, Chatsworth, but they're kind of struggling this year. So it really has me thinking, like, yeah, I would still schedule tough, because when I get in a league, it's only going to get tougher at that sense in terms of the pressure's higher, right? Because now you're in league play. You're not figuring things out like you do. There is no, well, this is non-league. No, now all the pressure's on. So you want to have that non-league be in a position where, now we've been here before. We've faced teams just as tough, if not tougher. And I mean, ultimately, if, let's see, 6 teams, so they're going to play 5 games. If they go a combined 2 and 3, that's going to get them in the middle of that D1 bracket, probably. Maybe not get that home game, but I don't know. I still don't see it as that much of a detriment. Really quickly with NoHo in our lead, I spent a lot of time. These are 2 teams that I expect to kind of really be strong in league play. Kind of surprised by NoHo's start. And Arlita's one that is used to dominating the East Valley League. So with Arlita, I think this is a team that probably goes on a bit of a run when they get to league play, and then they really solidify themselves, and we'll be sitting here in 5 weeks like, yeah, this is the Arlita we expected. With NoHo, I don't really count them out, but Scott Fair's got a little bit of work to do.
Well, let's not jump the gun, because we're going to get there when we get into week 4. We'll delve a little bit more into that conversation about where we think the East Valley is going to go. For me, I think there's a bit of a balance that can be had a little bit. I definitely am not against scheduling tough, because that's how you measure your medal. That's how you kind of build that resume. But I am in favor of maybe in week 0, we don't have to go and schedule the biggest of the biggest dogs in the league, just because it's the first week. That week 0 game is realistically, outside of a scrimmage that you kind of have in the week leading up to, it's the first time real live ammunition you kind of getting to see what your offense or your defense is kind of going to look like. The first time you getting to answer some questions coming out of summer camp, coming out of fall camp, to figure out what exactly your team is. So I don't think there's anything wrong with maybe not scheduling someone that gives you a chance to maybe kind of see what you have in terms of your backup, your running backs, to seeing what your quarterback is seeing, or like, it's the first chance to really put something on that all 22 film to kind of really be able to kind of sink your teeth into. And it's kind of difficult to do that when the first couple of weeks out you're scheduling really, really tough teams. You know what I mean? So I think there's kind of a balance to be had. And also, it's harder to keep kids locked in when you work so hard in the summer, then you come right out of the gate and you 0-3. It's just hard mentally for kids to kind of feel like, okay, all this work we put in and not seeing results. You want to see some results, just because that's kind of how you keep everybody sort of locked in and not sort of falling by the wayside mentally when the going starts to get tough. So I agree. Don't stop scheduling the tough teams, because that's what you need to do, because you're not going to be able to duck them when you get to postseason. But also, let's schedule some teams that allow us to kind of get a feel for what we have kind of going into the season. So, all right, we'll leave that conversation there from the week 3, from what we had in week 3. Now we'll start looking ahead to week 4. Before we go through the schedule, though, there are some questions kind of going into week 4 that I think are a little bit intriguing in terms of teams, the haves and have-nots so far. Our unbeatens, we still have a couple left, and we have some teams that are still kind of figuring some things out. But with league play on the horizon, it'll give some teams a chance to reset. But let's start with the 2 4-0s, the Van Nuys Wolves and the Taft Toreadors. We have 2 teams that have gotten off to hot starts. We have 2 programs that we've kind of seen is coming on the horizon, what they're building towards, with the talent and the stabilities that have been built into those programs. that weren't there for a long time. It feels like a bit of a renaissance because you kind of got to go back to the 2010s to the last time both of these teams were sort of relevant in terms of the conversation about postseason or being real viable threats to league titles at the same time. So I'll ask you this: with Van Nuys now going into Valley Mission play and Taft barreling down towards West Valley play, and we know how tough the top of those leagues are, who do you believe in more in terms of this start to the season? And which one of those teams, if you had to pick, do you think would be able to sustain it when they're getting into league play?
See, looking at what both of these teams have done, and I'm going to keep this one really, really, really short. Taft jumps in head first, and they jump into the fire really quickly. And so does Van Nuys. I'm going to say Taft probably stumbles a bit out the gate, and Van Nuys stumbles a bit out the gate. They both got these tough matchups coming up. I mean, Van Nuys has Kennedy this week, and we're going to dive into that when we look forward. And it really, really is going to test all their mettle with everything they've done with Taft at Eagle Rock in their final tune-up. That'll be an interesting test. Having Birmingham in the middle of their league play is probably going to be the best thing for them. They get a couple weeks under their belt. So if I had to pick one, I'd say Taft. Probably a little longer, but I think they both kind of have moments where they need to regroup. Probably this week.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for both. Like I said, and the reason why it's tough for both is like we talked about, like though both of these leagues are going to throw gauntlets at you on a week-to-week basis. Like in the West Valley, there is no easy games. Even like from a Taft perspective, who would you look at and say is the easiest game in that league? Probably Chatsworth. But look at what Chatsworth just did this week, getting off the mat, and we know what you're going to deal with when you're talking about Chatsworth. Yeah, that's a physical team. That's a tough team. That's a team that prides themselves on winning games that people don't think they're going to win. So there is no way to kind of avoid what you're going to have to deal with in the West Valley. It's a gauntlet for a reason. There's a reason why most of that league is either like open bound most years or D1 bound, and anything that falls out of open or D1 usually makes a deep run in D2 or D3 playoffs when they get there. It's legit. It's the real deal. If I had to pick one, I guess I'm leaning towards Van Nuys only because, like I said, just based off the track record of what we saw Ken Osorio build with this team last year and how much of a pain in the butt and applying the ointment they were last year. And you're seeing them sort of kind of pick up where they left off. It was something I kind of wrote about in the gyms this week. And looking at Van Nuys is like, yes, this is a prove it week. This is going to be a prove it stretch for them. But when you look at what they've done, when you look at their track record and what they've built in the last season and a half plus, I'm not expecting them to beat Kennedy. But if you came out of this game telling me like, hey, that game was a shootout because Van Nuys was holding their own and they were holding their own and going back and forth with this team, I wouldn't be surprised either. And beyond that, I look at the rest of the teams in that league, and there isn't anybody else in that league I don't think that they can't play with and or beat. So if I had to put my money on one, I'm going to say Van Nuys because I just think that the track record is there a little bit longer than Taft, and we also know what that gauntlet that Taft is going to have to run. So I would say if you had me pick, I believe in Van Nuys' ability to kind of, keep this going a little bit better. Now, on the other side of this, we're looking at the East Valley and how, in general, this league, in terms of their, all the teams have kind of struggled getting out of the gate, where we literally have Fulton, Poly, Fulton, Grant, North Hollywood, Verdugo, and Chavez all sitting at 0-3, all still searching for that first victory. But now we're heading into East Valley play. and that gives an opportunity to sort of kind of hit the reset button, as I said earlier, and kind of maybe turn things around. With those list of teams that I gave you, who do you think is most likely to turn it around as we now hit the East Valley League play?
This is kind of tough and unexpected for most of these teams. I would have expected most of them to be 1-2, couple to be 2-1. Most likely to turn it around, with the way Scott Fair runs that ship, and they're jumping right into league play. North Hollywood has to be right up there as one of the teams that you expect to be able to turn it around and at least come out of it. But they're going up against a challenging Monroe team that is doing things we haven't seen since Monroe bullied their way through the East Valley a couple years ago. So that is not an easy way to start league play. Verdugo and Chavez, so one of them is going to be 1-3 after Friday, and that's always a dogfight between these two teams every single time. I've never seen these two have a game where it doesn't, and then Fulton and Pauley are going head to head. So it really, really is an interesting scenario. I don't really have an answer. When I look at it, I want to say things that come from my heart and not my head, but my head tells me that all of these teams are gonna have to really just scrap it together and battle. There's gonna be a couple of them picking up their first win this week. I feel for Grant. They're going into Arleta. They're hosting Arleta. The way Arleta's been playing this year, it would be a really, really good upset if they did it. And if Grant was to pull off the upset, now we're talking about a team that really turned it around. But ultimately, they've all kind of put me in a position where I look at them and I go, I don't know. Having to pick one, probably pick Chavez and the work Nunez has done. He's generally really been able to keep that team scrapping and pulling things through. So that's the one with my feet to the fire.
Holden to answer to this question, to me, like, I look at North Hollywood, and North Hollywood is a team that, we know what they did last year. We know they're still DNA there. Like I said, and to be completely honest, watch that game against Granada in week 0. We saw some things. We saw some things that showed some growth in terms of them offensively and adjusting to some of the losses in that program that I thought would sustain them a little bit better. And ultimately, like I said, this team has played only a handful of games so far. They still got 7 more games to go. Like I said, the foundations were still there, so I do expect them to turn it around. But there are 2 teams I also look at and I say, okay, their best football is still ahead of them. I look, to me, like Fulton, Grant, and Chavez, I think are struggling from the standpoint of, I think the losses in vital important pieces to what they've done. I think they're missing that a lot this year, and I think that has led to the struggles when you're looking at those teams. But Verdugo is a team that we talked about what happened in that Hoover game. So there's hope there with the Dons from the standpoint of we've seen them play well. Has it resulted in wins yet? No, but we know what that coaching staff there does We know what they're capable of. And like I said, with so much football still left to play, there's a little bit of confidence. Hey, if they can go get a win this week, they might probably get it rolling. Poly is another team. The results haven't been there, but I've watched them play against San Fernando, and that final score was not indicative of the way Poly played. Poly's issue this year is they've got to clean up the mistakes. They actually have the ability to run the football, but also throw the football down the field and hit big plays. The problem is they haven't been able to get out of their own way with a lot of mistakes they've been making. If they can get that cleaned up, and pick up a win this week, we could also start talking about a team and then potentially that can put a couple of wins together. Maybe it starts to look and feel different than it has the first couple of weeks. So to me, the answer is North Hollywood, but I would keep an eye on Verdugo. I would keep an eye on Poly because I think there's some potential there with those two teams to also kind of maybe get back in that mix with our leader and maybe get something shaken this year. So let's look at the week 4 schedule rundown. We've got a lot of intriguing action, especially with the East Valley and the Valley Mission all getting underway. The action starts this week on Thursday night with the East Valley full slate getting underway. Poly on the road at Fulton. Two teams looking for their first win. Somebody's going to get their first win of the year. Our leader on the road at Grant. Monroe at North Hollywood. That's a big one. And Verdugo at Chavez. Also 2 games in which someone's finally going to get a win in that win column. And then moving on to the slate on Friday, Van Nuys on the road at Kennedy. Big test for them. Big test for El Camino with Palisades coming in, the number 6 team in the city section right now, coming in to face Elko. Big test for Taft at home, their 4-0 start. That unbeaten start on the line when they faced Eagle Rock Eagles. We know what type of team they are. We saw them come in and put 56 up playing Kennedy. You got Sylmar on the road at Chatsworth. That's always an intriguing battle. Canoga on the road at Panorama, another prove-it game for a young team, having to now face an angry Panorama who just got their first loss. Granada Hills on the road at Fairfax. Fairfax is one of those teams. Don't let the 1-3 fool you. Always tricky having to deal with that team on that side of the city. Reseda on the road at San Fernando. And Birmingham gets back to it after a bye week as they host the Calabasas Rams. Another intriguing matchup there. So, with all the action on the slate, what matchup intrigues you most here on the week 4 slate?
All of them. All of them. I mean, you've got, East Valley jumping in a league play and right off the hop. We mentioned a couple of these teams are going to grab their first win this season. It's exciting for that. You're going to come in and you're going to pick up a win. Someone is. You've got the Van Nuys Kennedy. That is insane way to kick off league the way Van Nuys has started the season. Their offense has shown that they can run and gun and they can kind of stick into it. Their defense has gotten some stops. Would you be surprised if that was a last team with the ball wins? I wouldn't. Not the way it's gone. Taft and Eagle Rock. Birmingham and Calabasas. There's honestly, I looked at the entire schedule, and I'm gonna steal your phrase. I want to be an amoeba and just split myself and go all over. Fortunately, I got a bum foot. I can't go anywhere. But it's an exciting week, and I'm here for all of it.
Yeah, for sure. Like, listen, it's so much. It is. I try to keep the gems to 5 games, just so I'm not, because I'll be writing forever, because I'm always intrigued to watch all of our games. This week was really tough, trying to cut that list down because there's so much stuff. Like I said, I love that the fact that we get the East Valley gets its own spotlight on Thursday night with those 4 games where you just kind of focusing on what's going on there. And then that's just the appetizer to get to Friday when you do have a bunch of teams who are going to get to answer some questions about themselves, about their start. When you're talking about Van Nuys and Taft and you're talking about Canoga, like the upstarts. And even a lot of respect for like Panorama coming. How do they respond after their first loss? Birmingham, what kind of work and preparation went into these 2 weeks and having a week off, and what adjustments are they going to make with Kevin Hawkins under center, and going against a Calabasas team that's going to be tough coming in their backyard. San Fernando, how do they bounce back? Granada Hills continues to run this incredible gauntlet of 10 games before they get into West Valley, where they're on the road again at another tough place to go play. Like I said, that Elko game with Palisades, if I had to pick one, I think that might be the one that's at the top of my list in terms of intrigue, because what does it say about Elko with everything they've sort of done? And we've seen them play consistently, whether they've won or lost. We've seen what this team is and how tough they are. If they can hand Palisades their first loss, one, how far up the rankings do they shoot? Two, what are we talking about in terms of the West Valley? Because like I said, we're still answering questions about Birmingham in terms of how far ahead of the pack are they still? Are there teams in the West Valley that are going to be able to play with them? Last couple of years it's only been Granada, but now we're seeing some consistency being built with Elko, with Taft, with Granada being able to sort of reload and restock and kind of continue the philosophy still going. But Elko, to me, is a team that, man, we start to change the conversation around what this season